South America, a spacious land extending from tropical equatorial forests to frozen tundra, inhabited by indigenous people with ancient traditions and deep, mysterious cultures. Like North America before the turn of the 1900s, it was also a land of opportunity, a magnet of immigration from Europe and Asia. Some immigrants came seeking gold and power. Some sought asylum. Others were looking for homes where they might find peace and sustenance. The wanderers were no longer guided by the North Star in the nightly sky. Rather, they found the Southern Cross and a climate exactly in reverse to what they knew. Still an environment in which it was important to transmit to their sons and daughters the history, language, religion, and culture of their ancestors.
Funding for We Never Don't Forget Germans from Russia in South America is provided in part by Arthur E. Flegel, Maria Kaiser McTavish, Michael M. Miller, Donald C. Schenk, Eric J. Schmaltz, and the members of Prairie Public.
I love my grandpa because he was a guy that had courage. He did things that few people do. And he started a business with no money. And he just worked. My grandpa he only knew how to work.
We can see the photos, and he talked about the history from the Mennonites when they came from Russia to Germany and later here to Brazil. And I remember when we was a child, we make a trip with all the family to the old Whitmerson, to the colony, and he present here we was, my parents lived, and so he present us all the history from this place.
One of the many groups seeking a new life from their home were Germans from Russia, a group of people who had left Germany as early as 1763 and settled near the Volga and the Black Sea, in Volhynia and Bessarabia. Mennonites as well, all of whom had begun to look for new homelands as early as the 1870s. Many went to North America and settled in the Great Plains, wheat farmers as they had been in Russia. Others heard of opportunities in South America.
There was so much poverty in Russia. There weren't any jobs in these years, and the boys had to serve so long in the military.
Oh, they told us the wonderful time they had in Russia. In these years when they had the freedom. And when the law of Russia gave the guarantee you can have all your own schools, you are free from the military service and many privileges. All this fall down when there came this revolution of the communists. The government take the land away, and our people lost all the freedom what they had. Until this time, the government shut our schools and our churches, and many of our people died. This was the reason for the flight to Brazil.
They had a very good life, but they didn't serve the military service. And the government obliged the new German to go to the armed forces. They didn't accept this. It was very difficult because this service was for 7 or 5 years. And another thing was that they didn't have lands for them. So too many children, and the land that was offered by Catherine II is coming smaller. We have to go to the America.
My father was in World War I. At the end of the war, he had been in military service a long time, serving as a soldier. He was drafted and went to the front. In 1925, there were dark signs that a second war was coming. At the end of the First War, some political problems gave Bessarabia to Romania. And my parents were born in Russia and then Russia threatened to take Bessarabia back. My father was afraid of that. He said, "I never want to take a weapon in my hands again and shoot my brother dead. I don't want to hear anything about another war." That is the reason why we immigrated.
Well, people went to either North or South America based on what they knew about what they were getting into. They were recruited by a variety of people. The folks here in North America, the railroads had a lot to do with the recruiting of immigrants of any variety that came particularly out to the prairie areas. In South America, it was a little more coordinated at a government level. They were seeking, as a government, immigrants to come down and populate certain parts of the country. And so they specifically invited particular groups to come to Argentina and Brazil as well.
Deutschland. Die kamen dahin und haben dann Werbung gemacht.
There were recruiters from Brazil and Russia for immigrants to populate the lands bordering Argentina. Then people quickly decided, we will emigrate. They owned none of the land they farmed in Russia. They were renters, sharecroppers on the land. The people had no future. There was land in Brazil. That was a motive for the way out.
Before they departed, they went to church. They received a blessing there. The priest gave a sermon and then they left. And they sang a song. Now the hour is here. We are going to America.
Jetzt ist die Zeit und Stunde da. Wir ziehen nach Amerika. Der Wagen steht schon vor der Tür, mit Weib und Kind marschieren wir.
Bueno, ¿por qué dejaron Rusia?
They came out of Russia escaping the war and misery. They selected the destination of the vessels so that some people of the same family went to the United States, others to Brazil, and still others to Buenos Aires. Different boats went to different places. They did that so that if a boat sank, some family members could survive by being in a different boat.
In 1930, the group was 1,500 persons, or 250 families. They came on 15 different ships from Hamburg to Rio. You see, when they lost Hamburg, they didn't know what it means come to Brazil, to go in the jungle. And it was very hard for them, for this decision, because they want to go to Canada. But Canada gave him not the permission for the immigration. And this was the reason that they came to Brazil.
My parents came from Ukraine. They left in 1929. They were in Moscow, in Germany, and then getting their papers in order, and arrived in Brazil in 1930. They wanted to go to Canada, but Canada closed the borders. As a result, they went to Brazil.
When the first settlers arrived in South America between 1877 and 1878, they found an environment quite unfamiliar to what they'd experienced in Russia. Over the next 40 years, many more immigrants would follow.
They traveled by train to Bremerhaven. The trip lasted up to 1 or 2 months. The government built a structure to receive the immigrants. They had to remain there in quarantine for 40 days. Then, on the ship journey, there was much sickness, and also many died on the trip. When they arrived, they were so happy that it was now their own land. We no longer needed to rent.
They would have liked to have gone back to Bessarabia because everything was jungle here. There was no work. All the difficulties were here. And they hadn't imagined how it would be. They would like to have returned if they could have, but there was no money, not anything at all, so they just had to start over here in the jungle.
In 1930, they went to Santa Catarina. They were there for 20 years, and they had to live in the rainforest, and those were very difficult years. They had always been farmers, and Santa Catarina did not provide such opportunities because the land was really hilly where they lived. So they went searching for land here to be able to plant wheat. These settlers split up, with one group going to the south of Rio Grande do Sul, almost on the border with Uruguay, and the others came here to Paraná, where the land was level, and they became farmers here.
1880 y algo, creo.
Around 1900, they arrived in Brazil, but soon they moved to Argentina, especially to Buenos Aires. From there, they spread to different places and colonies. The government distributed lands and organized the colonies and immigrants by number. They wanted the immigrants to get directly to the farm. Some refused because they had no tools or equipment.
When they first got here, he told me once a story that they made a little cabin with some wood that they got out of the forest, and then they had some appliances. And the first money that his father made was cutting down trees and making wood for building railway tracks. And then he would exchange it for flour, for sugar, for salt, and then since that's the way they started doing things. They got a chicken or they got a little pig so they could start raising more.
My father told me a lot about our first Christmas. They had little at all to eat and nothing extra for Christmas. Our first neighbors were German, but not from Krasna, not from Bessarabia, but German, and in the afternoon they came and brought a few sweet rolls that they had made. They ate together and wept. They wept about all the difficulties in the jungle. Then they said, "It's Christmas after all. We shouldn't cry. We should celebrate a little and be happy. It's Christmas." And so they ate their sweet rolls together and they sang Silent Night all together. That's what I know about our first Christmas in the jungle.
In 1877, come to Brazil, invited by the government, 5 explorers. And the government knows that they only planted wheat. When then they arrived in this region, they liked very much because it was very similar with the Bergside in the Volga. Here we want to land. But they don't ask to nobody if the land was good, but it was not for wheat. So 3 Volga Deutsch come to the Rio de Janeiro to speak with the emperor. And he received them and spoke in German.
Emperor Pedro II granted the delegation permission to leave Brazil and go elsewhere. They had become increasingly poor each year, and so some went back to Russia. Others went to the United States or Canada. Most, however, went to Argentina.
They left Brazil to go to Argentina because the conditions were not good.
Argentina offered land more favorable for planting wheat, gently rolling as in Russia, but not as cold. It felt a bit like Russia, except the people could not understand Spanish. However, Germans from continental Germany had previously settled in Argentina. Germans from Russia encountered them as another distinct and rather difficult ethnic entity.
Argentina was a land of immigrants from all over the world, and there were also many German nationals here. German Russians, having a funny dialect and funny clothes, were treated as Russians by these Germans. They were not considered as fellow countrymen. This caused an identity crisis in a land of so many ethnic groups. German Russians considered themselves German and were considered so by most Argentinians, except by the German nationals. When the Nazis came to power, they saw an advantage. They went to the German Russians and said, "You are our ethnic brothers," and targeted them to adopt their goals.
Initially, land on the Volga was held in the Mir system. That is, it was held communally. apportioned in strips by lottery to male heads of the family every 7 or 8 years, and it was never owned by individual settlers.
I thought if I lived long enough, I wanted to write a book about the Germans who were on the Volga because they were always renters. They could never buy land. When they came to Argentina, they had freedom to buy land.
There were two different ways to think during those days. Some people had enough with what they had back in Europe. If they had 20 hectares back there, they were okay with 20 hectares here. In Entre Rios, people have small parcels of land. There are lots of chicken farms on small pieces of land. But if you go a little more to the south, to the Buenos Aires province, their farms are around 300 and 400 hectares. Even though they all came together in a ship, they decided to settle different areas.
The property that my father bought back then still belongs to the Miller family today. My youngest son lives there today, and I hope in the future it will remain for long years in the hands of the Miller family.
They tried to develop communities around churches and schools and smaller little rural neighborhoods. So they may not have come from one village, but from a little group of villages that had interrelated families.
As in the old Volga colonies, the people wanted to live joined. They did not want to live separated. In Entre Rios there was a very big problem because the government tried to make them live separately. So they tried to make the houses joined and separated by an avenue in the middle and a lot of house in front of them. And this is a typical house of the first settlers.
And today, they had no stone and no forests, so it was adobe in the first. In Marienthal, we had the pine tree. So the pine tree was very good for building houses, very good. In Marienthal, in Johannesdorf, in Paraná, in general, and in Santa Catarina too.
As in Russia, they tried to work as farmers. Fortunately, the lands were very, very good, but they had to work hardly to break the roots, the land, and to obtain the first harvest of wheat. When they arrived, they signed a contract to pay all the things they received. They received cows, a hoe, an axe, a horse to work, and in 2 or 3 years, with the harvest, they paid all the things they received.
It was very hard, very heavy work, carrying bags around, each weighing 70 kilos and up, carrying them on your shoulder, piling them up, getting them ready, attending the animals and such things. Plowing time started during February and March and lasted till June. When everything was planted, there was nothing to do. They got together to play cards, sing. They got together almost every night.
The Mennonite community of Whitmersum in Brazil moved away from its first location. It found land more suitable for farming wheat and called it New Whitmersum.
But for the future, it was not possible to remain to stay there because the young people left our colony. And then in 1951, they decide 100% to sell the whole colony of Santa Catarina and to find a new land. The idea and the conviction, it was so strong. We have to work together. We must find a land like Whitmersum. We must go back to our social and economic structure like we had in Russia. We won't have our own schools. We won't have our own hospital. We won't have our own cash that we can do what we know, what we want is necessary.
Juan Hibbener tells of land purchases by his family. It is typical of a farming enterprise in Argentina.
Esto fue cuando en el año
Around 1920, my grandfather, with his brother and a brother-in-law, started this farm. They had lots of land that was allocated by President Avellaneda to the foreigners with low interest rates and many years to pay. So he bought the land together with his brother because there were too many acres for just one man. In those days, they had around 1,800 hectares, and this land passed down to their sons, my uncles. Some of them sold their lands, some others decided to stay, and so here we are today. It's a family thing, and I hope it stays this way, that my kids can keep the farm that cost so much for those who started it, my parents and my aunt.
A variety of crops in the area contribute in great measure to the economy of the region.
We have the black beans, the Brazilian black beans, and it's on the May end and June. It's the time to harvest them. You plant this in November and December in the spring season. We have here the season to plant these corns, and on the winter we can plant this landscape for the cows. We doesn't have the snow. The soybeans he harvest, and then we sell those for the industry, and they need it to make the kitchen oil and for the export for Europe and Asia.
Santa Rosa is called the soybean capital of the country. Why? Because originally soybean started here on this line. The first seeds were brought from a Lutheran pastor from the US, and this pastor, he used to have meetings with farmers to discuss their problems, and then they introduced the soybean and they started cultivating. Nowadays, Brazil is between the second or the first largest exporter of soybean in the world. And this is the main crop of a country which moves billions and billions of dollars a year. Santa Rosa is very famous for the soybean festival because it started here.
Language played an important part in passing German-Russian culture from one generation to the next.
They spoke Volga German. They could read the German church books. They could pray in High German. But then they closed those books and spoke Volga German.
Mis padres, entre ellos, hablaban en alemán.
My parents speak German to one another and with my grandparents who did not speak Portuguese. So, if I needed to talk to my grandparents, I had to learn German. It is not a perfect German. Our German is pretty corrupt and is mixed with Portuguese and Spanish. The German language that we speak in Brazil or Argentina is rudimentary and very basic. With family, we needed to talk in German, with others in Portuguese.
I think they've kept the language more than we have here. And I think it has to do with that they've maintained their communities longer than we have. From the smaller communities, their movement into the cities has been something more recent, and it probably has more to do with education and the opportunities that you seek once you have education.
Mis abuelos llegaron a hablar todo y mis padres hasta hoy.
My grandparents used the German language. My parents today still speak German. 70 to 80% still use the German language. In the last decades, the government emphasized the Spanish language in the public schools, specifically for the immigrants, not only Germans, but all nationalities. But today, our root language is still German, and it is used very much. Distant villages and those apart from great centers suffered a less intense influence because of their isolation, but in the villages, we still talk German today.
From the period during First World War up to the Second World War, people, they were not supposed to talk in German. In schools, they weren't supposed to teach German anymore. Lots of material and lots of documents got lost, so birth certificates, other very important documents, they got lost. After the Second World War, they burned all the German books and all the papers that belonged to my great-grandma, so we don't have a record or track of any of that.
But in the Second World War, the position of Argentina won't show we are not with the German. The consequence of the World War II was very terrible for the Volga German people here, but the Argentinian government take out the German school and the German church.
Por ejemplo, mi abuelo contaba.
My grandfather used to tell us that they were persecuted and mistreated because they looked like foreigners and were classified by people in all the derogatory ways. So, to have any news about his people, he went to a mountain at night to listen to a shortwave radio to know what was happening in Europe. If any Brazilians listened to them speaking another language, they denounced them to the authorities, thinking we were plotting against them.
How the colonies developed down there goes all the way back to the folks that were invited to immigrate in the first place. The governments of both Brazil and Argentina at that time were Catholic. They brought over more Catholic immigrants proportionately, and they targeted those groups, assuming, I think, that they would be more assimilatable into the culture and the groups down there. So there are a number of those colonies down there that are still exclusively Catholic colonies.
Well, we were upstairs of the Cathedral of Santa Ana in Ponta Grossa, the highest place in the city. And from here, you can see almost all the city. Not totally, because there are very many mountains. Ancestors lived in a village after that last houses, where is a forest, a little forest. There was the colony, they named like in Russia, Streckerau. And from there, they came walking until here the church for the Mass.
The church, I consider it one of the most important things that kept the community alive. Church has a tremendous power on the Volhynian Germans. So what church would say, what the pastor would say, that was rule. In our generation, it's not so anymore.
There were 15 families of Germans, Catholics, almost all from Krasna. We had no church, no school, and so they took a little hut, cleaned it up. It had a thatched roof, a little hut like where poor people live, and that was our church. My father wrote about it quite exactly, that he had then set up a cross in front of this church, for he said, "Without a cross there can be no salvation." And he set up this cross. In front of this church stands a cross, the same cross seen in the illustration of Krasna. Yes, and so I am proud and honored by my parents and ancestors about what all we have learned and inherited from them.
Along with the iron crosses, another art form deeply connected with the church was music.
Our region, they weren't too much into dancing and singing. They were more related to religious singing, and you go to sing in church, but you're not supposed to go to parties and dance. And this is more related to German, Catholic Germans, right? Not to the Lutheran Germans. When boys got together, they used to have folk sings and sing.
They did sing. Church singers. Church singers were always men. The men were in the choir loft in the church and sang in the Mass. Yes, always men. No women.
My father played the violin, and in the evening we sang lots of songs, folk songs and hymns. His children all learned music, and I am very proud of my father. I still sing German songs in the church choir, as well as gospel and Baptist songs and songs in Spanish.
Alle Jahrengin, bis es 26 sind. Alle Jahrengin, bis es 26 sind. Ho Susanna und der schöne Hanna, ist das Leben noch.
German music is still strong and very present, especially in celebrations in any locality. I can tell you that all the colonies have a German music group that represents the community. The colonies have radio stations that broadcast German music and programs, including the young who listen and play the music.
There was music all day long. My father performed lots of music. German-Russian music, very musical. He bought an accordion, a guitar, and we sang and played the entire day. At home, we had a piano, we played it, we all studied music.
We still have a group that comes together and sings, and of course has something to eat and drink.
Ich zogen eins trinken, mein Hals der tut mir weh, mein Hals der tut mir weh, und wenn ich eins getrunken hab, viel besser tät mich gehen.
The Germans from Russia and South America came together with family and friends in their free time and transmitted celebrations and traditions to sons and daughters. Such festivals include the Volga German Kerb, a parish fair generally celebrating the establishment of the local church. Food and music form a major part of the festivities.
There are many festivals, in the last 10 years, the Krepel Fest in south of Buenos Aires province, or the German Immigration Fest in San Antonio Village in Entre Rios province, but traditional holidays here related with the church.
Ist gefeiert worden.
Christmas was celebrated in church, then in the family. Christmas, New Year, Epiphany, Kerb, they were all celebrated. But birthdays were not celebrated. In my family, I think our first birthday celebration happened in 1970. Names days were celebrated here. My father was a Michael. On 29 September, St. Michael's was celebrated. Then friends, acquaintances, the family would come together and they would sing German songs, play the organ, and dance. The older folks would gather. Youngsters weren't allowed. The older folks would say things that the children weren't supposed to hear.
Easter was celebrated not only in the church, but also at home, particularly for small children.
My mother sent us to bed early on Saturday evening. We had to disappear. When we fell asleep, she took chicken eggs, then she filled them with sweets. Chocolate eggs came around much later. We didn't know anything about chocolate eggs. Then you had to prepare a nest for a box. look for grass to fill it, and make it look like the Easter bunny had laid the eggs. In the morning, we woke up early and ran out into the yard and looked for the nest.
Christmas. First in the church. The Christ child would come at night. Then on January 1st, Belznickel would come. Belznickel around here was the feared man. Not everyone would have a Christmas tree, but we didn't have one. We were poor people.
Beyond church celebrations, people come together for simple card playing and other German-Russian games such as Bannock. Yet foremost among German-Russian communities, however, are family gatherings, whether on weekends or in the celebrations of courtship and marriage.
They always played cards, Sunday or Saturday afternoon. Sunday they played Durock, 66, poker, and they drank a good bit, sometimes till they didn't know how to get home.
One thing that is very important that I could observe that it's different here from North America while I was in Saskatchewan is that here Sunday the whole family got together, uncles, cousins, so the chance to get together, they would get together and gather and feast and drink and eat and talk. Generally they would visit their cousins or friends once or twice a week.
Weddings were always at the house of the father and mother. The community had only a very small church. Mass was held in the morning. It had to be on a weekday, not on a Saturday or on a Sunday. Then they cooked. They made noodles and fried chicken, had chicken and pork, and they baked kuchen. They also made wine, and then afternoons, the whole afternoon, they danced, music and dancing.
And when they married, Catholics married Catholics and Protestants married Protestants. They didn't mix. Also a German with someone local, a Spanish speaker. No, that was not allowed. You have a daughter, you have a son. They didn't even know one another. One might ask, where is love? The father would say, love comes afterward. Why did they marry so early? To honor God and to go forth and multiply.
More recently, strong ethnic bonds uniting families in marriage have loosened to include intermarriage with other ethnic groups.
Something was an issue, marrying people from the same ethnic group and mainly from the same church group as well. This was very strong at my parents' generation and even stronger on my grandfather's generation. It lost power. In our generation, there isn't any concern about that.
The family of my mother is descended from German Russians who settled down in the Entre Rios in the 19th century. They came from the Volga villages of Messer and Bauer. My father is not a German Russian. He is from an Italian family and Croatian.
The Germans from Russia in North America have been in contact with those in South America since the immigration to the Americas began. We've connected with several families in South America, particularly in Argentina, who wanted to establish more communication once we got things going electronically with email. That was a big help in furthering the communication.
I suppose we have relatives we don't know in many places in Canada, especially because the surnames are very similar. It's imperative to know where I came from, who I am, and to know the real history and what happened to our great-grandparents and grandparents and down as far as our parents, and transmit that to our children.
Though there was little contact with relatives left behind in Russia, most recently, contact between relatives in North and South America includes formal reunions of families separated by time and fortune. First in letters, then in celebration.
In the next year is Lowell.
Lowell came with his sister, and I got to know them. It was very nice, and I'm happy about it. Lowell already had a picture of me, and we met with other members of the family. We found one another again. We had no contact over the years. As I said, my father always had contact through letters.
Today we're in the province of Entre Rios, Argentina, and having a little family reunion. I received a photo one time from a cousin in Idaho asking if I might know who the people were in the photo. I just had recalled my father telling me when I was younger that we had relatives in South America. So when I found that, there was about 3 people, I believe, that had the last name Grauberger here in Argentina. So I just sent a blanket email to them, telling them who I was and what I was doing and seeing if we might possibly be related. One of them replied, which was cousin Miriam. And about, I believe it was 8 months later, we made a visit down here and started meeting different members of the family.
The role of women has expanded from nurturer and medical caregiver to less traditional professions.
It was in the country. There was a lot of work. My mother went only to the 5th grade. She couldn't go any further in school because she had to do farm work. Then she finished primary and secondary school when she grew up. We were all adults. I was already married when my mother finished school. I think she was 42 years old.
The woman has the house to care for, the children, and also works alongside the man. My father and mother had 10 children. 4 died and 6 lived. My father always said, "A man that has not yet lost a child, he doesn't know what pain is." There was a doctor, but one needed money. You have to know, these were poor, poor people. They had nothing.
The woman generally is become teacher or a professor or graphic designer or a lawyer, a doctor. It's not a lot generally of the Volga German now continue working in the farmer work.
Then my parents-in-law were among the first pioneers to arrive here. They soon worked at milk production. Today we raise 160 cows with calves and young cows. We have employees, and my daughter and I actually operate this together. My husband and our 2 sons, they prefer to be farmers. They don't want to do what we women here do with the cows. They raise corn and soybeans.
Fundamental to the welfare of the community is the necessity of food and drink, which echoes practices through decades in Russia and South America.
The food traditions carry across the generations and across the geographic locations. Some of the things that I have eaten down there, I could have eaten in Kansas as well.
Drinking, yes, they made their own schnapps. Schnapps with grapes, with other fruits, and quite strong. And with a little bit, they were already rather tipsy. But they did drink a lot. The Black Sea Germans didn't drink as much as the Volga Germans, but all of them drank. Only the men. The women cooked. They baked and cooked so that the men would be happy.
Drinking beer. Yes, our older folks drank beer. But they drank kvass. They made kvass at home. But they didn't sing beer drinking songs as is so popular in Germany today.
For our people, the Black Sea Germans, we always fixed pork. Always roasted pork. Put it in the oven. We made things with dough. Knäfle. Lots of cooking. Lots of apple cooking. And cheese cooking. And grape cooking. Lots of noodles, lots of strudels. We ate lots of meat. Lots of meat. We raised a lot of sheep and ate a lot of mutton. Not so much beef, much less, but pork and mutton. We had it all year long. We butchered to make sausage. We had lots of sausage. We made ham. Everyone had a cellar, and they would hang it all up so that there would be something to eat the whole year. Every family butchered 5, 6, 7 sows in the winter so that they would have something to eat in the summer.
I know my grandparents and the customs perfectly well. My grandmother taught me to cook traditional foods of the Volga German people, and today I still cook at home, but only a few times a year because of the high calories.
I think that people enjoy German foods and the recipes when we meet with my cousins. My mother makes them, but my cousins can't. All the women today have jobs and not enough time to make them. Grebel, for example. We like that very much.
Regarding to food, one of the things that I can remember and that my grandpa told me, it was very common, the use of cabbage. They used lots of cabbage in their dishes, cabbages and basically pork meat. Why pork? Because it was a smaller animal, it was easier to butcher, and the whole family consumed it because at that time they didn't have power to keep that. Pork and chicken were the most common foods.
In Europe, they have potatoes. Here we come in Brazil, and there's this tall plant with large roots. It tastes good. It grows fast. Mandioca. And we ate it as potatoes. We also ate corn, which we planted. We drank milk. They had butter and cheese. The colonists always had gardens with fruits and vegetables.
I frequently use black sugar, black beer, spices. There's no recipe. I cook the way I've learned. I like Kraut Bieroks despite being Protestant. I am Catholic, but I like Kraut Bieroks, and I learned to cook them.
No matter the change from an agrarian to an urban setting, Germans from Russia feel the need to pass their cultural inheritance, received from ancestors, to their descendants.
I am interested in our history because of my grandfather, but young people are generally not so interested. I speak German only with a handful of German nationals or those taking classes.
My grandparents were farmers, like most German Russians. Perhaps it is interesting that they reflected as a family and as a family history the story of many other farmers who migrated in the 1950s and 1960s into the cities to find better opportunities. Because they had small plots of land in Entre Rios, and there were few opportunities in the economy of the land during those years. Because of that, many families of farmers occupied themselves as simple laborers at the time of industrialization in the cities of Argentina.
I contribute to new projects which aim to develop in the regional tourism. We produce many things in our community related to the German culture, folklore, music, dance, language, and the like. That way, we recover our pride about the heritage that we get from our origins.
We have an association in our community, a Bessarabian association. My father founded it. We have about 1,000 members, and once a year we meet and we make our Bessarabian dishes. And then we have a church service, and then we go to our monument. That is the Krasna Cross, just like the cross was in Krasna. And that is our symbol of Bessarabia.
We transmit our culture, and like my son, who feels like a Volga German, my son knows the customs. He cooks. I taught him many recipes. When he visits Santa Anita, where many of my family are buried, he invites me to visit his great-grandfather in the cemetery. He sees and feels the roots he has. For him, the customs are normal and become a part of his life.
You have in your front an old man. I thinking what I shall do with my library. From young people, I am collecting documents. I have thousands of documents. I give them my books. It is my presentation for the Mennonite community in Brazil.
For those of us who are in the Facebook world, I've had a lot of Facebook friend inquiries from Argentina in particular, and also from very young people, which I find very interesting as well. They're searching for their roots and wanting to connect with those sorts of things. But when you look at the list of the friends of some of these folks who are in their 20s, their friends also all have Volga German names.
Social media and the web made easier this research. I start, for example, with my genealogy researching in 1995. There are many books from the American Association for Genealogy, and there are many contacts with people in Russia, in Germany, or in the United States for continue researching.
Yes, we keep in contact over Facebook. The celebrations and reunions of the Volga Germans, we meet people here in Buenos Aires and other people. I plan to visit other colonies and their celebrations.
How do the German Russians of South America view their place in the world and in the future?
I have a good life. My father didn't. Neither did my grandfather. Those were poor times. We have grown up. We have a good life. Work. We have inherited that from our ancestors. Work. But what can I say? I thank God. I thank God for what I have experienced. I thank God that I come from a good family. It hasn't always been good and beautiful. They say whatever is always beautiful can also get spoiled.
I am of Argentinian and Volga German blood. What we have learned from our parents, we follow by transmitting to our children. We are who we are because of all the things our ancestors have left to us. Our pride is a way to honor our ancestors for everything they have passed on to us. Argentinians are the people who opened the door for us, and that's why we feel thankful and feel Argentinian too.
We have the moral obligation to transmit our culture to our children. Like many other people who survived, they lost some of their culture over time. Each day, I am proud about my origins. I do not deny and do not hide them. I like to make them known because, until now, it was taboo.
I think we must bring the youth people nearer to the history. We make this every year. On the 25th November, the service here in Widmersum. And the second is we must write more. We must write more libraries. We must write the history or make movies or film this. I think because today the most of the youth people, they don't read the books. And so we must find a way to bring them near to the history.
Knowing the past opens doors in the future. Because if I didn't know the stories of my grandpa, I wouldn't be able to talk to people while I was in Canada visiting there, a group of people or a country that doesn't value its past, doesn't know where it's going to its future.
Whether in Argentina or in Brazil, and like their relatives in North America, German-Russian people regard their ancestors as bastions of perseverance and strength. Whether from the Black Sea, the Volga, Volhynia, Bessarabia, or Molochna, parents conveyed their history, language, traditions, religion, and foods to their children in an unceasing cycle of inheritance, of giving and of receiving. Fragments of a culture may be lost as fresher pieces are acquired, but the transfer from one generation to another progresses continuously and constantly. My grandmother or my grandfather embroider the rhetoric of Germans from Russia who gather their memories to define themselves.
We never don't forget. When our people left Russia, one of our citizens played this song on the harmonica.
Funding for We Never Don't Forget Germans from Russia in South America is provided in part by Arthur E. Flegel, Maria Kaiser McTavish, Michael M. Miller, Donald C. Schenk, Eric J. Schmaltz, and the members of Prairie Public.
To order a DVD copy of We Never Don't Forget Germans from Russia in South America, please call 1-800-359-6900 or visit our online store at prairiepublic.org.